In this episode, you'll learn how word stress changes some words from a verb to a noun and from a noun to a verb so that you can improve your pronunciation. We also comment on your feedback about the IELTS exam and how to make small talk. Welcome to
Aprender Inglés con Reza y Craig.
Hello and welcome. My name's Craig.
And my name's Reza.
And with nearly 50 years of teaching between us, we'll help you improve your English and take your grammar, your vocabulary, your pronunciation, everything concerned with English up to the next level. How are you, Reza?
I'm doing very well, Craig. I'm enjoying this time of year. It's June in Valencia, very pleasant time of the year. It's nice and sunny, but not too hot yet. That will come in July and August, but for now, things are fine. How are you?
I'm still very busy as I was last week, but that's not a bad thing. So yeah, it's a bit hectic this time of year with exams, but everything's fine and looking forward to podcasting with you again this week. But what's first?
First of all, we're going to start with a voice message from way down under, all the way from New Zealand, and it's Paulina.
Okay, let's go to the other side of the planet.
Hi guys, it's Paulina from New Zealand. I am preparing my IELTS general training exam, but I am having a hard time coming up with my own simple ideas. I'm talking about writing task 2. Do you have any tips that can I use? Like, for example, how to plan and organize myself well? Because I think that's my main issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Paulina, for your message. Really liked some of the comments you used and some of the expressions. You said you're having a hard time coming up with ideas. Lovely phrasal verb and a lovely expression to have a hard time doing something. You're preparing the IELTS exam and specifically writing task 2. So before we look at a definition of what the writing task 2 is, do you have any comments, Reza, in general?
Paulina, I thought your pronunciation was excellent and you were really, really fluent. A very, very good message. However, there were a couple of little things. I'm sorry there's always a however, but we want to help. I think you said that you were having trouble coming up with simples ideas. I think you put an S there on the word simples. But simple is an adjective, so it doesn't matter if it goes with a singular or a plural noun. It doesn't change. So you need to say simple ideas. No S on the word simple. And another thing, I think you said, do you have any tips that can I use? That can I use is the wrong order. You're probably thinking, hold on, it's a question. I'm asking a question. And for a question, we change the order. Like, can I use your pen? That's right, that's a question. But the thing is, this is an indirect question. You're saying, do you have any tips? And then the second part, that I can use. The second part, I can use, doesn't follow the order of a question. It's what we call an indirect question. It's just like a normal positive clause because really your question is, do you have? That's the question. Do you have any tips? So that it looks like a question. Do you have? But the second part, I can use, doesn't look like a question. It looks like a positive sentence. We call that an indirect question. So it's the word order. You need to say, do you have any tips that I can use? Is the correct order.
Now, Paulina, we have spoken briefly about the IELTS and TOEFL tests back in episode 68 a long time ago. So if you want to listen to that, go to inglespodcast.com/68. And specifically about writing task 2, I have looked at the website and this is what you need to do. You will be presented with a topic and you will be tested on your ability to respond by giving and justifying an opinion, by discussing the topic, summarizing details, outlining problems, and identifying possible solutions, and supporting what you write with reasons, arguments, and relevant examples from your own knowledge or experience. Now, I haven't taught IELTS, but that sounds to me very similar to the essay question in part 1 of the B2 Cambridge first exam. Do you agree?
Yes, it is. I've taught quite a bit of IELTS. I've done quite a few classes, and it is. It's pretty similar to the Cambridge essay exam questions.
But more words though, right?
More words for the IELTS. They recommend about 250, whereas B2 first, I think, is 140 to 190.
Correct.
So it's about the length of advanced, which I think is at 220 to 260. About the length of advanced, about 250 words. And I noticed that you said, Paulina, that you're doing the general IELTS exam. Just to remind everybody, there's two types, academic and general. But the second question in the writing is the same for both. The first question is different, but the second one is always this type of question.
Good luck with your preparation for the IELTS exam, Paulina. And I will recommend one website that I think is very good for preparing the IELTS exam. And there's a link in the show notes. It's IELTSLiz, IELTSLIZ.com. Link in the show notes at inglespodcast.com/370 for this episode. What's next, Reza?
We have another voice message now, much closer to home. It's Antonio from Madrid.
Much closer to home.
Hello, Dio. Antonio speaking from Madrid. By the way, since I know you like to collect countries where people listen to your episodes, I've been listening to you for 3 years, nearly every day while commuting in Casablanca in Morocco. As you've commented before, driving there is an unforgettable experience. Nowadays, I'm back in Spain and keep listening to your updates. Getting down to business, I wanted to ask you about the nuances of using 3 words. I searched the podcast archives and haven't found any records about it, so I'm guessing you haven't dealt with them before. My doubts are in the use of the words behaviour, conduct, and demeanour. About conduct, I'd like to know if it also changes the syllable stress with its different meanings. Well, I have more doubts, as you can imagine, but I will leave them for another day. Okay? So thank you. Bye.
Thank you very much, Antonio, for your message. Wow, 3 years in Casablanca, Morocco. And did you say you were driving there? I wonder if there's any difference between driving in Casablanca and driving in Madrid. You've driven in Morocco, haven't you?
I've driven in Casablanca.
What was it like?
It was a very rude awakening to Morocco. The expression rude awakening means that when you are very suddenly confronted with something that is not easy. I arrived in Morocco for the first time in my life, got to the airport, and from the airport took a rental car, a hire car. Looking back on it, maybe it wasn't a great idea because I had to drive from the airport, first time in that country, straight to the center of Casablanca. Don't do that if you just arrived in Morocco. If you've never been before, if you've been before, maybe, but if it's your first time, don't do it. Don't do it.
You're right, Antonio. We do get a lot of pleasure listening to people like you who have been listening to us driving around the streets of Morocco. And we have listeners in China, in India. More recently, someone from Senegal sent us a message. So it gives us a lot of pleasure. If you are listening in an unusual place, we would very much like to hear a voice message from you because we do kind of collect them and enjoy listening to them.
And by the way, Morocco is a lovely country and I strongly recommend visiting there. It's only the immediately getting into a hire car from the airport is the bit I don't recommend, but everything else about the country I recommend.
Yeah, the culture shock behind the wheel. You said one thing, Antonio, I'm keep listening to your podcast. Better to say I keep. So I keep or I'll keep. I will keep if you make a prediction or a promise at the time of speaking. I'll keep listening to your updates. So let's look at Antonio's questions. The first one was behaviour, demeanour and conduct. What's the difference between those three words? And I had to check because they are quite similar. So I had to make sure that we're giving you the right information. The first thing to say or point out is the difference in spelling, because behaviour, if you are a British English speaker, has a U, so it's behaviour. However, in American English, in North American English, US English, there's no U. So behaviour. And it's exactly the same with demeanour. So U if you are a British English speaker in the spelling, and without a U if you are an American English speaker.
And what about the actual meanings of these words? Well, behaviour could be defined as how people actually do things, whereas demeanour could be how people move, their body language, facial expressions, etc. In other words, how they look and behave. So it also reflects ideas to do with character and feelings. So demeanour is a bit more specific than behaviour.
For example, I could say that Reza has a very friendly demeanour. He smiles a lot. He makes eye contact when he speaks to you. He has very open body language. He comes across as being very friendly. So the way you come across is the way you project yourself with all of those things together. The way you smile, the way you move, the way you act, that's your demeanour. So whereas my mum might say to me, or you might say to your child, your young son or daughter, behave yourself, be good, demeanour is a lot more than just sitting down and not throwing food. It's the impression you give another person.
You also asked about the word conduct, Antonio. Conduct immediately sounds more formal than behaviour. It's similar, but it's not exactly the same. Apart from being more formal, we could say that behaviour is how you demonstrate your actions, whereas conduct is the relationship between your actions and the norms, that means the normal rules of society. So if you behave in a way which is not considered normal or appropriate for a certain situation, people would question your conduct.
So even though those three words have those slight differences, they are quite similar, and in some cases they might be interchangeable, but there are small differences in use. So let's move on to the second part of Antonio's question. He asked about changing word stress when the word is a verb and a noun, because with the example we've just mentioned, conduct, that's a noun, your conduct, how you conduct yourself. So if you're listening carefully, you may have noticed the stress change on the word. When it's a verb, the second syllable is stressed, conduct. Please conduct yourself in a proper manner. And conduct, the noun, has first syllable stress. His conduct left much to be desired, for example.
We're going to give you some more examples of the different stress, the different pronunciation between nouns and verbs. But just before that, let me refer you all back to an earlier episode that we did with our good friend Wayne. And that was episode 180, where we talked about word stress and other aspects of pronunciation. So go to aprenderingles.com, episode 180, 180.
And before we move on to give you some other examples of changing or shifting stress in verbs and nouns, interesting to look at the collocations you can have with the verb to conduct, because you can conduct yourself in a proper way, which means you can behave yourself correctly according to society's norms. But there are other things you can conduct apart from yourself. You can conduct an experiment, which means do an experiment. You can conduct business with someone, which means do business. Conduct an investigation if you are a private investigator or a policeman. And if you're into politics, very often you hear the expression to conduct an inquiry. The government is conducting an inquiry into blah, blah, blah. And if you like music, you can conduct an orchestra. The conductor of an orchestra is the person with the baton who is conducting and marking time for the orchestra. So there are some common collocations with the word conduct.
Two other nouns that you need to know about, and verbs, which we'll look at in a minute, are decrease and increase. So if they're nouns, we, again, just like conduct, stress the first syllable. Decrease and the opposite, increase. For example, we've seen a decrease in COVID infections. Or it could be the opposite. We've seen an increase in COVID infections. And then the verb shifts, changes to the second syllable, the stress. So decrease and increase, for example, numbers are decreasing every month. Or the opposite, numbers are increasing every month.
And similar words, two-syllable words that have this changing stress, and very common words, import and export. So the noun, again, has the stress on the first syllable, import, and the verb import is stressed on the second syllable. So here's a question for you, Reza. Do you know what Spain's top import is?
Well, that's a good question. Let me think.
I didn't know. I had to check.
Let me think for a minute.
It's not tourists at the moment.
Yeah. I'm going to take a guess and say that it's natural gas.
You're very close. In fact, I wouldn't say that you're wrong because it's crude petroleum. And I believe that gas comes from petroleum.
I think it's a byproduct.
Maybe $28 billion last year from crude petroleum. And the second biggest import, cars.
If we wanted to use that word as a verb, as Craig said, we'd have to change the stress to import. So we could say in January 2021, Spain imported more than it exported. Yes, you might think he's added an extra syllable. That's right, because I've made it a past simple. Yeah, so I added ed, but still the rule stays the same. I need to stress the second syllable. So then in that case, this will be the one in the middle. Spain imported more than it exported. I'll tell you the actual figures. Spain exported 21.2 billion euros and imported 22.9 billion euros, resulting in a negative trade balance of 1.69 billion euros.
Probably because of the pandemic. That's why they had a deficit. Our next two words, object and object. Now, I hope by now you're recognizing the noun, the stress on the first syllable, object. For example, Reza, do you believe in UFOs? Well, what is a UFO?
Aha, unidentified flying objects. Do I believe in UFOs? No, I don't.
Me neither. And the verb to object. I objected to being spoken to in that tone of voice. That's why I lost my job at the helium balloon factory. I objected to being spoken to in that tone of voice.
So if you object to something, that means you don't like it. You're not happy about it. Another noun which has its verb form as well is present. I'm sure you know that noun because we all like to get them, don't we? We all like to get presents. Craig, when was the last time someone gave you a present?
That's a good question. The last time I received a present was from my friend Eva, who sent me some cheese from the north of Spain. So if you're listening, I have thanked you, but thank you again, Eva.
And Craig, I don't know about you, but I miss, that means AIRC370, I miss going to conferences and presenting on podcasting.
Me too.
Presenting, yeah, I stressed the second syllable. So that was the verb, giving presentations.
I hope that you haven't been insulted recently, because insult is another word that has shifting or changing stress. The noun again, stress the first syllable, insult. The salary you are offering me is a complete insult. I'm insulted by your offer. So the verb is insult. I won't insult you by saying no. I like that expression. If someone offers you some cake or someone offers you a glass of whiskey, you could say, well, I won't insult you by saying no, which is a way of accepting what you're offered.
The next noun we've got is discount. For example, is there a discount on these trousers? A discount, a reduction in price. And it can be a verb, but the verb has a different meaning in this case. People often discount my theory on vaccine wars. They discount. That means they don't take it seriously. They don't consider it as relevant. Discount.
My theory on vaccine wars is that some vaccines are discrediting other vaccines so that they can sell more. And many people discount that theory.
Oh, I'm convinced that you might be right. Yep.
Another word that has changing stress with verb and noun use is update, or update is the verb. So using the verb, we are updating our website, which is something I've been meaning to do with the Inglés podcast website. To update the website is to bring it up to date, to make it more current. And as a noun, we've got some updates on the podcast for you. So listen to our recent updates.
Another word which is sometimes applied to technology, but it also has other applications, is upgrade or upgrade, depending on whether it's a noun or a verb. Here's an example as a noun. We got an upgrade on our flight to business class. That meant we booked a normal tourist class, but because there weren't many people on the flight and they wanted to treat us well, we got an upgrade. That means without paying extra money, we got a better service. And as a verb, it's time to upgrade my mobile phone to make it a better quality or a better one, to upgrade.
Have you ever been upgraded on a flight?
Never in my life. And you?
I have once, yeah. I was flying to, I think it was Greece many years ago, and the plane was double booked. It was full, and they offered to upgrade me from economy class to business class. It was very, very nice, but it's dangerous because then it's difficult to go back to economy.
It's difficult to do the opposite. It's difficult to downgrade.
Yeah, it's very difficult once you experience how comfortable it is in business class. But yeah, if you have a low budget, there's no choice. Refund and refund is when you get your money back for something. You can go to a shop where you have previously bought something, and as a noun, you ask for a refund. Excuse me, I'd like a refund, please. Here's the receipt. The receipt is the ticket or piece of paper you get when you buy something. So here's my receipt. Can I have a refund? And if they agree, they refund your money. Stress the second syllable. They said they'll refund the deposit on my holiday.
Now, the next word we've got is an interesting one. REBEL. So if it's a noun, again, let's follow the rule. Stress the first syllable. For example, he never obeys orders. He's a rebel. Rebel. But it could be a verb. In that case, of course, we'll have to stress the second syllable. For example, the separatist group are rebelling against the government. So stressing the second syllable. I added ing. It doesn't matter if you add an ending like ing, ed. It's the second syllable that you stress. So that is the one in the middle in this case.
Competition is a noun, and another noun which is similar, which kind of means competition, is contest. You can have a beauty contest, which is a competition. So Brian won the photography contest, or Sarah won the beauty contest. The verb, obviously stressing the second syllable, is to contest something. Notice I didn't say contest, I said kun, because when you're stressing the second syllable, the first syllable becomes weak, contest. She wanted more money, so she contested her father's will. And the will is the official document you leave when you die so that people know where your money and where your property is going.
And what do you mean there by she contested a will? She didn't have a competition, did she?
She didn't have a competition, but she protested or appealed against the decision. So when you want to doubt something and protest against something or appeal against something, you can say that you contest it. You argue against it.
The next pair we've got is project or project. For example, the noun. Are you working on any interesting projects? By the way, I've heard a few people say interesting projects, but the correct pronunciation according to the dictionary, what we can see is projects. So slightly different vowel sound that some people say, but according to dictionaries, projects. Are you working on any interesting projects? And the verb, what do you project for next year? So the vowel sound changes to the schwa sound, the that really lazy sound when it's a verb. What do you project for next year?
Are you working on any interesting projects at the moment?
At the moment, no. What about you?
There's one that I've been trying to work on, but I haven't had time because of the exams and other things. So I hope this summer to work on a project connected to teaching, but I don't want to talk about it yet. Maybe I won't do it. I don't want to promise anything, but hopefully, this summer I'll be working on an interesting project that I will tell you about if I do it.
Yeah, let us know when you decide.
Moving on to our next pair of words. Well, it's the same word. We're just shifting or changing the stress, and that's permit for the noun and permit for the verb. So the noun is permission to do something. For example, imagine you want to go fishing. Now, in some rivers in the UK, you need a special license to fish, and that's called a fishing permit. So there's the noun. You also need in some countries a work permit to be able to work in that country. And the verb permit. For example, the company will not permit you to smoke while on duty, for example. Or you're not permitted to park your car in this street. You're not allowed to do it.
The next noun I've got for you is contract. Similar in Spanish. And the pronunciation then would be, for example, have you signed the contract? So we stress the first syllable because it's a noun. It can be a verb, and of course then we got to stress the second syllable. For example, Spain's economy is contracting. But slightly different meaning. It doesn't mean that Spain's economy is going to sign a contract. It doesn't mean that. It means that it's getting smaller. So to contract can mean to get smaller. Spain's economy is contracting.
A word that's unfortunately often in the news is conflict, and the verb is conflict. So the noun conflict, there's been more armed conflict in Burma, for example, or currently there is some conflict in the north of Ethiopia, in Tigray, which is causing a famine. So conflict, unfortunately, is very often in the news and really means a war, even on a small scale. And the verb conflict, you can have conflicting information, which is information that doesn't agree, it's not the same. You can have conflicting views. Two people can have conflicting views on politics, for example. Reza, do we have any conflicting views on things?
Virtually nothing. Except one thing comes to mind. When it comes to accepting cookies on websites, I always say no if I can. And I think you've said you usually say yes.
That's true.
That's
Yeah.
about the only thing where we have conflicting views, where we conflict.
When you said cookies, I thought you were talking about biscuits. I'm thinking, no, we usually agree on
We
biscuits.
agree on biscuits, cookies, yeah. To end, we've got one more which follows the rule or doesn't, depending on how you want to pronounce it. There's always got to be an exception, hasn't it? And as is usually the case, the Americans are more logical, let's be honest. And the word I'm thinking about is ADDRESS. So, the rule that we've been talking about the whole episode is, if it's a noun, stress the first syllable. And that's exactly what they do in American English, address. But in British English, capriciously, we break the rule and we pronounce it address. Would you agree?
Yeah, definitely.
So there's always an exception. The Americans follow the logic. I take my hat off to them. It's in British English that we don't. So look, two different accents. In American English, what's your address? In a British English, what's your... Sorry, do it again.
That was a British person who's just come back from
America.
living in America
That
for
was
2
somebody
years.
who's like mid-Atlantic somewhere. They're not
somewhere
quite
in
sure.
the middle.
So American might say something like, what's your new address? And a British person might say, what's your new address? So it's the British who break the rule for that word. We both agree that the verb has stress on the second part, the second syllable. We don't have any disagreement about that. For example, the president will address the nation tonight. He will speak to them. He will address them.
So we hope this has been helpful for you, and especially for Antonio, who asked the question. Just remember that rule to stress the first syllable with the noun and the second syllable with the verb. And Antonio, if you have more questions and you said that you did have a few more doubts, please let us know and we'll be happy to look at them in a future podcast. But now it's your turn to practice your English, because we love getting your messages, especially if you've been driving around Morocco in a car. So send your messages, your voice messages, to our SpeakPipe service. You can get there by going to speakpipe.com, SpeakPipe/Ingles podcast. Emails, Reza?
If you prefer to write to us, you could write to craig@inglespodcast.com or belfastreza@gmail.com.
And in the email, you can present your ideas. And we remind you that we are present on our website, store.mansioningles.net, where you can buy some courses to help you improve your English.
As always, we'd like to say a big thank you to the people who are helping us by supporting the podcast through the Patreon scheme. They are people who've joined the program for as little as $1.20 per month. That includes the VAT. And as a reward or a thank you for doing that, they get instant access to recent transcripts. In other words, they get to read all the words that we say. If you're interested, go to www.patreon.com/inglespodcast.
We'd like to say a special thank you to our most recent Patreon sponsors who have joined us this month, and they are Fernando Figliolo, Ignacio, Juan Rios, Miguel, and another person who has remained anonymous, who, together with Miguel, is supporting us for more than the minimum $1.20. So thank you, and thank everybody who's supporting us on Patreon. Next week, we have no idea what we're speaking about, but we promise you we will be back next week with another podcast. Until then, keep safe, and thank you for listening. It's goodbye from Reza.
And it's bye-bye from Craig.
Music in this podcast is by Pitts. The track is called See You Later.